You have your presentation up here, if you guys want to start with that first. So, oh, okay, and yeah,
Oh, thank
you
you.
got your answer to that.
There's some extras. Okay.
Yeah, and feel free to start whenever and just introduce yourself to everyone and
Okay. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Hopefully, we're engaging and not too boring here. We're coming from Casa Cornelia. You'll hear a little bit about our presentation, but I think more than anything, we want to make this as interesting and as engaging as possible. So if there's any questions at any particular point, feel free to jump in. I think that always makes it more interesting, and it also will give us a sense of direction of where you want to take this conversation. So together, Ann and I, we probably got close to half a century of experience
We're old.
in this field and the related field. So we feel, more than anything, we want to contribute and help out however we can in the journey that you'll be embarking on very soon. Could be very rocky and hilly and change of directions, and you'll have to pivot, and you'll hear about some of the things that we had to go through to get where we're at. So I think more than anything, we just wanted to set the table like that. So we'll start off with our presentation.
Okay, and
And
I'll
it'll be
explain as we
you.
go in. So, yeah, okay, that's really long, but so, yeah, so short title is I'm an attorney. I have a longer title at Casa Cornelia Law Center now. It's the Legal Support and Strategy Director. I've been in that position since September 1st, 2021, after 23 years in another nonprofit running a legal program focused on victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and trafficking. So, I was where you all were before, where I was considering what do I do after college. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be an engineer. I thought law might make the most sense, but it was still kind of vague for me exactly how that would work and what I would get it. So you can see here in my bio, I've had the opportunity in my career to not just do direct practice in representing victims of domestic violence and trafficking, but also teaching. So I still currently teach at California Western School of Law, where they asked me to design a course based on the work that I do. So we teach a class called Women in Immigration Law. And you'll see as we get into further discussion why it is really important to do what excites you and brings you joy and not try to fit a particular model that you think you're supposed to follow. Okay, so I think we're both prime examples of we didn't follow the mold. We weren't loud about it. We just kind of
Create our own path.
our own path. So
And that's me, not as long as Ann, of course. But in essence, I never entertained the idea of law, and I'm not a lawyer. But here I am with Ann, kind of interesting. My idea was I wanted to save the world. I was
I wanted to be
I was at every, social event, political event, different things. My idea was more in humanities, sociology, anthropology, psychology. I kind of did a whole, exploring all the social sciences. I went into history and didn't like it because they wanted me to read a lot and it was gonna interfere with my partying at the time. So I was like, I had to make a decision and went into sociology where I can manage that a little bit better. But then I found anthropology and fell in love with anthropology. But by that time, I already had, half of my coursework is already completed. So I was like, well, I better turn this into a social science degree and use everything rather than starting all over. And I went into social sciences. But once I graduated, it was the question, okay, what am I gonna do with social sciences? And I ended up going into a counseling center. So then I went into psychology and counseling and kind of did a whole, 360 of the social sciences. And that's how it worked for me more than anything. I was looking at working at a counseling agency first. Then went into the whole question of immigration and working with unaccompanied minors. And the story of unaccompanied minors, you might have seen them on news reels and, in the last 10 years, it's been a hot topic. And in my working at an unaccompanied shelter, I started off as a counselor, director, executive director, and came across all my friends at Casa Cornelia. And that's how I got tied into the legal side. It was like, oh, look what they're doing over there. Maybe I should have been working with them a lot, from the beginning. But again, it was not a very clear path, but it was something that took me in that direction. So, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to put out there that it was by no means, I knew where my passion was at, but I did not know where my life's work and the body of work that I would be putting out there, what that sense of direction was from the get-go, but it was always pursuing the passion.
Mhm. Okay, where are we? Oh, it's our mission. Yes, so we are a law firm. Now, if I tell you we're a law firm, what do you think of when I say we're a law firm?
Business.
I'm sorry?
Business.
Business? Oh, business. Okay. So far from business, but.
Yeah.
Business. Anything else? What other descriptors can you come up with when I say we're a law firm?
Peloco, Palali, Pro Bono.
So what?
I heard pro bono,
Pro bono? Okay. Well, you guys are reading it, but.
someone on the Zoom.
Mhm. Okay, someone on Zoom is saying pro bono. Okay.
Oh, there. Some Zoomers.
Okay, so this has been our challenge, right? Because Ismael came from the social service sector. I was a law project within a non-law firm. So I was in the community as well. So it was a bit challenging for the both of us to say, we work at a law firm. Why did I describe it this way? It's because we are uniquely situated in the fact that we are a completely pro bono law firm. We don't charge for our services. Do you have any idea how much it costs, let's say, if you went to a private attorney to do an asylum case? Do you have any idea how much would that cost?
I go like 140 to 250 an hour.
Oh, an hour, you think by the hour, okay, 140, 250 an hour, okay, and then calculate how many hours you think that of work you think that is to get someone through the asylum process.
Well, depends how the person bills, but
Mhm.
if they bill like fairly or not. But it obviously amounts to a lot over time.
Okay, okay. Would you be shocked if I say $15,000 to $20,000? That's average. Of how much in billable hours, I'm assuming it's the actual billable hours, that it would cost $15,000 to $20,000 for the cost of doing an asylum case. And we have a lot of asylum cases, we don't charge a penny for that. So what allows us to be very focused, immigration law is vast. What allows us to be focused is we focus on the humanitarian areas of immigration law. So those are those seeking asylum, those who are victims of serious crimes like domestic violence, sexual assault, trafficking, and children, the abused, abandoned, minor, unaccompanied children. So obviously, these are going to be the populations that aren't going to have the resources to pay $20,000 for their case, right? Or their derivatives are involved in their family, the 10 children. They're going to really need the support for free, right? So that's pretty much what we do. We are, just so if you have this information, we were started out of Sister Anne and Sister Mary Wayne Graydon, Sister Anders and Sister Mary Wayne Graydon's brainchild to address this need in San Diego County. And they started Casa Cornelia Law Center in 1993 in their condo. So Sister Mary Wayne is a graphic artist, so created beautiful letterhead. Sister Anders is the sister / attorney / professor / president of Rosemont College. So she knew how to put what needed to be put together to eventually have this become Casa Cornelia Law Center. Okay, all right. So I just shared with you the kind of cases we handle. So Ismael can go over why, again, we're even more unique in that we can't really operate the way a law firm would.
Right, so Anne laid it out perfectly in the sense of we're a nonprofit organization that provides legal service, right? And when we talk about us people seeking asylum, what comes to your mind when we say an individual, he's an asylum seeker? What are some of the generalizations without trying to,
Without giving you a legal definition.
yeah,
What do you think?
what would you think?
Someone who's trying to leave a negative situation in their home country, whatever that may be.
Good,
Okay.
yes. Anybody else?
Probably from a country in the global south.
Yes.
Country in the global south?
Seeking ultimate permanent residence in a new country.
Perfect. Anything else come to mind?
Okay, you said negative situation. Can you give me an example of a negative situation?
It could be institutional, like a war going on. It could also be personal, based on like a specific needs of like a particular family, and kind of the scale is different.
Okay. You think it's based on the individual?
I don't think it's based on the individual. I think it's based more so on the institutional side, like whatever
Mhm.
the government situation is, whatever the wartime or conflict or situation is, or any other like big issues that are going on that impact different people individually.
Okay, okay. So what's challenging about this, I think when you see it on the news, you think of like, oh my God, those poor people, we have to help them, right? So think of people and actually add an S to it, peoples. That's what asylum law covers, the negative impacts on peoples, not the individual, right? And it's for specific bases. It can't just be for any hardship. It's gonna be, you are gonna be persecuted or you fear persecution based on your race, religion, national origin, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. That's it. Okay, so if you're not amongst those peoples that are gonna be persecuted or have been persecuted based on one of those 5 things I named, you will not qualify for asylum. So hate to start off that way, but just any context. So you see why this is super important, right?
But before we go into that part too,
Yeah,
Casa Cornelia focuses on 3 aspects of the law. The second being victims of crime, so we
Right.
can kind of define that before we go further.
okay.
And then the third
Yeah.
unaccompanied minor.
Yeah, so the Victims of Serious Crimes under the Violence Against Women Act passed in 1994. It protects undocumented immigrant victims who have been victims of domestic violence by an abusive US citizen or legal permanent resident green card holding spouse. Okay, so prior to that, an abuser that is a US citizen permanent resident can decide to file, not file, and continue to terrorize their immigrant spouse. There wasn't really a recourse under immigration law until the Violence Against Women Act. Later on, with each authorization, it added another type of visa called the U visa, and that's for victims of serious crimes. You don't have to have the relationship with the perpetrator, but you will have to have suffered a crime that is covered under the U visa. And it has to be crimes that I would say are especially heinous. So if you guys like Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, those kind of crimes that are dramatized, it's not going to be a property crime. It's going to be stuff like sexual assault, trafficking, enslavement, domestic violence, of course. So the murder and kidnapping, and then the children. So children may qualify if they're abused, abandoned, or neglected, and they're minors, they may qualify for special immigrant juvenile status. Those groups I just explained, they may also simultaneously qualify for asylum as well. So we all try to strategize what's the best option for them.
Perfect. Now back to.
Now back to
So when we look at Casa Cordelia and we say part of our mission statement is that we help the indigent community, the most marginalized people out there. So we're starting to look and define the folks that we're working with. So it'll be asylum folks, victims of crime, children would qualify under a SIJS. We're starting to define who they are. And our service is really important because on the other side, we're talking about, okay, if you're gonna go out and look for legal support in the for-profit sector out there, it's gonna cost you, let's say, $20,000 just to get the ball rolling and get everything moving in the right direction. But if people are fleeing, are they fleeing with all their belongings? Are they fleeing with their money? Are they fleeing with all their, equity that they might have in their country, if they even have any? What is their economic situation?
Usually very poor.
Usually, I would say 99.9% of the time, they're very poor. Because of all the political strife that they may suffering, because of the abuse that they have already suffered. So in most cases, the folks at Casa Cornelia have as clients don't have access to the $20,000. In fact, right now, I think, what was it, last week or a couple of weeks ago, they determined that San Diego was the most expensive city in the United States, right? How many of us, including us, have $20,000 in our checking account? Right?
When you're dead.
Right? So think about that. If you're coming into this country fleeing persecution, all those things against you, and then all of a sudden, your idea is to get legal support, it's not really an option. So the clients that Casa Cornelia take in, we know are in dire straits, they're in dire need of support. So that's why we utilize this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You might have seen this. It helps us define who our client is and define the services that we need to provide them. So when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you look at the different levels to succeed in life, what you need to have available, what needs to be happening or occurring in your life for you to be successful, right? So first rung is the physiological needs. We're talking about food, water, warmth, and rest. If we're talking about people that are leaving their country and just showed up to our border, there's food insecurity, housing issues, may have not slept, for weeks or had a good night's sleep because they've been on the streets, right? So they may not have that basic level. But let's say they have obtained that basic level, they'll go to the next level, which is security, which is housing, having all the safety, everything that they need in their life, relationship wise. Okay, well, they graduate to the next level. Belongingness, having relationships, having the security to be able to develop a long-lasting relationship. That's not something that's readily afforded to everybody. If you just came out of CCA, out of the detention center, you're not gonna have, those relationships available for you. You left everybody back in your home country. And you go on from there, your self-esteem, your prestige, all these different things become things that you acquire thereafter. But the thing that I want to show you all is that when you look at a client that does not have anything, they're basically struggling at the basic level of this pyramid. When you look at somebody that is succeeding, let's say we had the $20,000 in our bank account, we would be at the top level where we're dreaming, what are we gonna do in the future? What's gonna happen? We would have some stability, right? So when we realize that our clients don't have that stability, how are they gonna be able to participate in a legal meeting if they're worried about food, if they're worried about housing, childcare, schooling for their kids, all these different things that you need to succeed? They're not gonna be able to participate 100%, right? They're not gonna be able to focus, they're not gonna be able to have a dialogue about talking about the traumas that they've had in the past. I mean, they're gonna shut down. So we at Casa Cornelia came to the conclusion, the realization that we have to support our clients at this basic level. Now, there's a contradiction there because we are a law firm and not a social service agency. But one of the things that's starting to come around is the understanding that all these different agencies have to work together. That a law firm cannot act independently without the support of, for example, what we've come to realize, interpreters. right? The access of interpreters, the access of social services. So in Casa Cornelia, we developed these departments to be able to support the attorneys and be able to give all of our clients the opportunity to access these resources and participate in their legal meetings. Becomes fundamental. So you wonder why, how did a social service guy that had no aspirations of going into law, work at a law firm? Well, Casa Cornelia came to that conclusion of, well, we do need social services. We just have to be creative of how we're gonna be able to do it. So that way we do not compromise the confidentiality that we have going on with our clients. So that is the basis of the services that we provide and the support services that we provide for our clients.
Okay, so that's good. That brings us to immigration law. That's huge. I teach a whole course on it. But the quick overview and then I'll.
Any questions so far, though? I mean, I know we've said a lot in a short period of time.
I had a quick question. How does attorney-client privilege play into the role when you're working directly with clients, but you aren't like legally bound by attorney-client privilege considering your
That's a phenomenal question.
social service?
And I didn't want to answer that because I want to see if y'all were paying attention, right? And thank you for asking that. So it is a balancing act. So within the agency, we are a law firm. So the ones that handle the cases, the ones that make all the final decisions and determinations are the attorneys. Okay, so without a doubt, okay? Now, the conflict is as if I start behaving like a social worker, because a social worker is bound by a different duty, a duty to report, right? If it's a minor, if there's some trauma or elderly abuse or something like that, I would have to report. So the thing is that we'll provide support services, but we will not behave like a social worker. In other words, the attorney makes all the decisions of what we're gonna do. I will not assess because that is the job of a social worker. I will not do any counseling because that's the job of a social worker. In turn, what I'll do is gain or obtain the recommendation from the attorney and act on the interest of the attorney to connect the client to the services outside in the community. So if Ann tells me this client needs counseling, it's not, okay, sit on my couch and let's talk about it. It's like, okay, you need counseling. I know License to Freedom, they're taking, clients right now. I'll make that call for you right now and expect to receive that service. So that's why we're providing these services and making that warm handoff and that direct connection to that service, but not ourselves providing it.
Let me just add to that because this has evolved, this role of ISMA has evolved over time. Casa Cornelia, a lot of times the attorneys themselves, when they started out small, they had to figure out, where do I get somebody who can provide interpretation? Where can I find shelter for this person? And I think that's what was causing a lot of the burnout. Attorneys that I knew, I've been practicing for a long time, attorneys that I knew would only be there for less than 2 years, right? Especially the ones doing asylum work. So they did try having an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker on staff, but then it created a challenge because they had to create some kind of a divide between what the social worker does and what the rest of the legal team is doing. So this has been, the best effort to try to have the support services coordinator role be basically part of the legal team, which means anybody that's part of the legal team with the client and the attorney, you are covered under that attorney's attorney-client privilege. So the confidentiality stays intact. Okay.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions come to mind?
All right, so immigration law, in a nutshell, is that you have people that come here for permanent reasons, they want to make this their home, or people who come here for temporary reasons. Can you give me an example of who comes here for a temporary reason?
Students.
Students, yes, I'm sure you have some international students here. Anything else?
Potential work project for like an international company.
Temporary workers, yep. Mhm.
Parents who want kids to have like double nationalities.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? What about people want to go to Disneyland? Visit the White House? Right, so these are all examples of temporary, right? The ones who want to come permanently, you have to have an avenue to do that. So the most popular one is through family, they call chain migration. So if you have a family member here that would be considered a qualifying relative, that person may start the process for you to eventually allow you to get your permanent residency and make the United States your home. Okay, you also have employment. So there may be certain sectors where we are really in need of certain occupations like the medical field, clergy is still in need, certain technical skills. We may have to look elsewhere outside of the United States to fill that need. And so you may get through an employment-based visa, you may get permanent residency that way. There's also something called the lottery. Have you heard of that? The diversity lottery? Like your name, you enter your name in a registry and then it's pulled at random. And then if your name's pulled, then you win. You don't win money. You win the opportunity to apply for permanent residency in the United States. You and your immediate relatives, which would be your spouse and your minor children. Okay. Then you also have those which you talked about political asylum. They really needed to flee for their life and they're here and hopefully they qualify for one of those categories. If they're pre-designated as refugees before coming here, then they won't have to go through the herring asylum process here. But if they left without having the opportunity to do that and show up, figuratively at our door in the United States, then they would be applying to seek asylum and want to fit the definition of refugee, meaning they're going to be persecuted for one of those categories. So that is that in a nutshell. Now that's immigration. Does that make sense to you? See how it works? It's more complicated than that, but that's it. Now, immigration law is very complex, and I call it the Alice in Wonderland of laws. Because if you think you know what it's like to be in a courtroom, having watched, maybe some criminal court hearings, family court hearings, or just see it portrayed on TV, they usually base it on that type of case. Immigration law is not like that at all. You've seen on the TV shows, right? Objection, hearsay, right? It's not at all. Immigration court, you can do hearsay all you want. It's not the same thing, right? So basically, immigration court is very different, which means, you really have to really know your client's story. You really have to know how your client is going to react, what things are going to further traumatize them, because they are going to need to be able to recount what happened, hit all of the things that the judge is looking for, and do it in a way that's going to be clear, coherent, and credible. Credible mean. That's the crux of the case. Is the client credible?
It's a kind of an element of like, are they who they genuinely say that they are? And are they looking to do the same things that they have spoken about wanting to do?
Are they telling the truth?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, are they telling the truth, right? How can you tell someone's telling the truth?
Sometimes people bring in like witnesses or other people who can testify on that.
Maybe
person's
there's
behalf.
witnesses, okay. What else? So that's to corroborate the story, right?
Graph.
Oh, they can't do
Yeah.
research for that, but yeah. Yeah,
Just using all their like medical records and arrest records and like every record. they have
okay,
for
so
someone.
further evidence, maybe some documentary evidence to support what they're saying is true. Okay, well, like Ismail said, a lot of times they're leading with just the clothes they have on their back and that's it, right? So it's gonna be a challenge trying to get all these records. So you see now, just to give you just kind of a picture of what we're talking about. My role at the Law Center, I'm not doing the direct cases anymore. I'm overseeing the support program. So I oversee the program Ismail's in. I oversee the language support program and I oversee the pro bono program. The pro bono program is where we recruit mostly attorneys from the private sector and all of the big law firms here to join us in this effort and take on a case pro bono. Okay, it doesn't mean that we give them a case and say, good luck to you. I want to make sure that when we're bringing an attorney or a firm in, that they understand what they're getting into, right? Because the idea behind this, part of our mission is also an educational mission. I want to make sure that the attorney understands that it's not that you're helping us by taking on a case. We are hoping that you're going to be transformed by this experience, going through the journey, especially for an asylum client, going through this whole process. And then you'll be better equipped to be able to talk to your peers about all the sound bites you hear in the news. You'll have a better, deeper understanding of what we're talking about. So the pro bono program, we have about 300 attorneys, and many have come back year after year after year and take on multiple cases. We have attorneys that want to just do asylum work. We have attorneys that just want to work with women or want to work with gender-based violence or want to work with children. And, you know, the hardest thing, I think, for the attorneys, especially the ones that come from the private sector, none of them really do immigration law. That's not their field. They do securities, real estate. Basically, they probably do have $20,000 in their bank account. But something is drawing them to help because they want to have a more meaningful way to give back. And they understand the privilege that they have being able to have a legal education and being in the position that they're in. So that's a pro bono program. And a lot of my former students are doing pro bono work at Casa Cornelia. So. All right. I just kind of went over that, but what is a pro bono attorney? The pro bono attorney, again, is primarily from the private sector, usually not doing immigration law. They're curious about how to do this, but they're actually really scared. So they could be making a lot of money and doing really well and be like the top in their field, you know, of litigation. But they're really, really nervous about taking on one of our cases. Why do you think that is? They're not going to show it. They're going to try their best to show like, oh, I got this. Why do you think they'd be really nervous about?
Someone's life on their hands. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. You have someone's life in your hand. It literally is that. And you're going to be walking alongside them in their journey. And for the most part, and Ismail is one who described this to another group that we did of high school students, you really do have to embody what the client has gone through in their journey as they're telling you the story. And that's where the challenge comes in. As a pro bono attorney, the attorneys may not even have the words to describe what they're feeling and how challenging it is for them and why they're having nightmares and why they're suddenly not able to, hopefully they're not at the point where they can enjoy everything else in life because they're worried about their life. But that's why, you know, the term trauma-informed lawyering has now come to be over the last couple of years, because the industry is starting to understand that attorneys in this space like us and attorneys who volunteer, even if they only take one case, need to be trauma-informed in how to interact with the client and also need to understand how it's going to impact them. And hopefully by having that conversation, they're able to continue supporting the work. Okay, so I went over this already, so there's that. Okay, so now getting into trauma-informed. You want to take that, Ismail?
A couple of things of what Ann was talking about, what makes this so unique. One of the things about immigration and immigration law is that on one side, you're on the cutting edge of what's happening in the world. In other words, if you're hearing about something on the news, we probably already dealt with this weeks ago, months ago.
20 years.
20 years ago, and you're just catching wind to it. Stories that you'll be hearing on the news, we've already heard those stories. I mean, we've already dealt with everything that's happening politically, you know. There's a crisis in Afghanistan, we're talking to the folks in Afghanistan. There's a crisis in the Ukraine, we're talking to the folks that are, you know, suffering the consequences.
For example, the Me Too movement and the Kavanaugh hearings. Reporters were calling me, are you suddenly starting to see like more women of color, immigrant women who have been victims of sexual harassment and are coming forward because of what they're seeing on TV. I'm like, no, that's like my whole career. It's well before the Me Too movement, well before any of that. They're just suffering in silence. So it's just now, that it's publicized, but it's always been there. So the more marginalized you are, the less power you have, the more likely it is that you're going to be exploited.
Would you say that the Anita Hill hearing in 1991 to 92 is similar to the Me Too movement that we grew up?
I would say that is the Me Too movement of my time, because I was taking my first women's studies class when that was being televised. And they tried to incorporate that into the classroom, the Anita Hill hearings. And you looked at it in two different ways. If you were white, which was predominantly my women's studies class, you're going to see it as, this is awesome. This is the Me Too movement. This is a breakthrough moment. For me, as one of the few women of color in my class, I saw how she was vilified as a Black woman. And I had experienced sexual harassment myself as an Asian woman. So I knew, maybe it's better to try to avoid that altogether or not, get to that level of having to report it. So because you would basically, it's a no-win situation. You would be targeted by everybody, including your own community. Any questions about that? Okay, so so understanding trauma and how it impacts your clients. We had a really great week of training for attorneys on that, and they really liked that part. The attorney-client relationship, adapting our case strategy, presenting and transforming vicarious terms. So all of that, we know, both Ismael and I, you don't have to be a lawyer to understand that if you're working with traumatized victims, if Ismael worked with youth, I worked with mostly victims of domestic violence, you understand that there's a lot going on in their universe well before they come to you. So anything that we do, even if it's just filling out the form and asking a question, is going to be triggering. Right? At the same time, we may think we're totally fine, especially with Ismael having his social science background and behavioral health and all of that, that you're totally prepared to deal with whatever comes your way. But there's always that moment where you really don't have all of the barriers in place to protect yourself from how it's going to emotionally impact things. For me, I did get used to hearing the domestic violence story. It became harder when I started to get more children abuse cases, child sexual assault cases. And it became even more challenging to see domestic violence transform into trafficking within the marriage. So there are like slight differences here and there that will still probably impact us because we've absorbed the trauma and we have to be aware of how it's impacting us and be able to ask for help.
So right along that thought process, I worked almost 20 years, Southwest Kiana Company, minor shelter, went through different roles within the agency. Heard a vast amount of stories. No story was the same. The moment you think you've heard it, you're really quickly shooken up and brought back to reality. Every story is unique. Everybody has this unique sense of how to handle their trauma. I mean, some of the most gruesome things that you could imagine we've heard. But there was something that always pushed me forward in working with clients, and that was the resiliency. That the clients of people that we worked with might have gone through some of the most horrendous things in this world, but yet they could still smile, joke with you, and you would feel their pain, embody it, but yet they were still kind of the ones that went through it, but they were also consoling you. It was kind of weird and unique in that sense, One of the stories I've shared, it was a young man, and this is one of the ones that kind of stuck with me the longest. Young man that came from Michoacan, Mexico, left, because the family had a little, storefront and they were trying to, what is it? It's a quota, in English, it's what is it, when you pay like 20%, 30% of the profits, so they were trying to charge the, I can't think of the word. But yeah, so they were charging the family, this money, right? And they refused to pay after a while. They ended up killing his father and his brother, and they were after him next, so he left, right? Family was fleeing. He came to the border. They paid for a coyote to smuggle him. They tied this young man to the bottom of the undercarriage of the car. And the car started leaking oil. So you could imagine oil going all in his back. And then once he got to the checkpoint, he just started yelling into him, "Get me out of here." Right? When he came into our facility, he had 3rd-degree burns on his entire back, all blistered up, couldn't walk for several weeks, right? And just imagine having to deal with all that stuff. And this kid turned out to be like one of the sweetest kids that you could ever imagine. I mean, beautiful smile, had gone through some of the most horrendous things that I ever heard, and the way he would explain it in the first person was just something that, I still carry to this day. But I carry his resiliency, his ability to be able to say, I've been through some stuff. And me, as a person that grew up in the United States, really never embodied anything similar to that. But I would embody his resiliency, something that was off the charts. And this is something that would move us forward. Now, when we talk about traumatic, informed trauma, we have to be clear that a lot of the people that we work with carry these stories. And if we're not prepared to handle these stories, we can create some harm. At the same time, as a professional employee, I know I need to know how to handle this trauma. Because then it becomes vicarious trauma. You suffered the trauma, you told me it, now I'm carrying the burden of everything that's happened to you. So we understand that the work is very heavy. One of the beautiful things that balances our work is that we're cutting edge, we're looking at saving people, the humanitarian side of it. The difficult side of it is the individual stories that we take on. So every lawyer that we have in our agency is hearing these stories, and they have to be told and retold, as Ann is talking about. Could you imagine the client having to relive that trauma? The attorney that's gonna go home to his family, to his children thereafter, and have a beautiful dinner, is hearing this story like a broken record over and over and over. I mean, we have to be conscientious of this, cognizant of all the impact that this has.
This is why, Snell's position exists. Because, all of our attorneys do get training on being trauma informed and have had to kind of seek that out, as they were impacted by their cases. But they really need to be focused on the legal strategy. They need to be able to focus on the case. So if their client needs food, their client needs shelter, their clients need counseling, need other things, they can't suddenly have the attorney also suddenly embody those roles. Nor can Ismael, because we don't need him to be a mandated reporter as a social worker. So Ismael has built an array of relationships in the community with these service providers that can provide that help. So you see what I mean? It takes a village thing. It really does. We don't do this alone. We are a unique nonprofit public interest law firm, but with the understanding that we are part of a much larger network.
Any questions?
Okay.
What do you think are some qualities an individual should acquire if they do want to have a similar career to both of you? Like how to not become too jaded and roll in pessimism?
That's a good question. And somebody that's figured it out, I think you have to find, and talk about it at the beginning, your why. what is the purpose? Because this is not for everyone, right? But at the same time, you have to find those things that are motivating you every single day and motivate you through some of the most difficult and darkest times that you'll also encounter in the work. For me, it was the humanitarian side. I needed to help people. That was my passion in life, was to be able to make a difference. So that was my initial take on it. After working with children, I realized that there was a greater appreciation that I gained from the resiliency that people have, and particularly survivors of trauma. I mean, it is something that is phenomenal and empowers me. If you've gone through something and you're consoling me, I'm kind of like, can I touch you? Because I need to have what you have. It's almost like a desire to be able to feel that resiliency that other people have. So I think that for me, those were the things that drove me and pushed me through some of the darker cases.
So I would just say, don't be too disappointed if what you plan to do didn't quite work out. Because maybe it's the universe telling you what you should be doing, right? So I, always get asked this question, like, how did you end up doing what you didn't want to be doing? I didn't plan it out. When I graduated from law school, I thought, well, I don't want to do defense. I don't do prosecution. I don't want to open my own practice. I don't want to do billable hours. So maybe I'll use my law degree to teach or do something else, and I'll do pro bono cases. That's honestly where my headspace was. Even though I had done the work doing restraining orders, I had done the work in San Francisco helping women who were getting out of prostitution and women who were in prison. So it was criminal defense, but a unique area of criminal defense. I started to, learn more about domestic violence and trafficking. I mean, I understood all of that, but that was stuff that I did as an intern. I wasn't getting paid for it. I had student loans to think about. So if I didn't want to go traditional track of law, and they weren't really pushing it at that time, public interest law, nobody really explained that to me. My only guiding force was, what do I really care about? Right? And in the end, it always came back to, I care about empowering women. I care about empowering young people. I don't know what form that's going to take. My honest reason for going to law school was that I felt I needed to understand how the law works. Because no matter what I did, even if I went the social work route and decided to do anything else, I knew it would be very helpful for me to understand how the legal system works, right? So whether or not I decided to practice law, but that has been my guiding force, and I didn't even think that I would end up being able to not just practice law, but also use my English Lit degree to write grants and be good at it. Again, your passion comes through in how you're writing your proposals, right? So think of the law degree. My professor from college was so right. The law degree is a very flexible degree because you don't necessarily have to fit to traditional mold of what's portrayed on TV as a lawyer. You can use that degree to do so many things. For me now, I'm back in school. So pretty soon I'll be able to call myself an Aztec too. I'm doing a master's program of women's studies here at San Diego State. I thought I would do that 2 years out of law school, but I decided I took a 23-year detour to do that. But it's because it was always something I couldn't really answer when I'm dealing with my cases. Why is this so hard? Why can't I just say my client was raped daily by the spouse and you prove the case? Why do I have to try to explain to you that that fits the definition of abuse? Right? So I wasn't in the spaces where they're talking about that. Now I am. Now I have more vocabulary to use, but but it would have been helpful because I felt I was isolated in my thoughts as I'm struggling with fighting for each client. Okay. And this is a quote from our legal director, who's been doing this for many years. So Jesse, I was writing an article for paralegals, and I asked them, of all of the cases you've handled in the asylum space, like what has a client ever said to you that stayed with you, that really changed the way you look at things? And this is what he said. He said, when I consider the most impactful thing an asylum client ever said to me, I think about an absence of words. When a young man who had just learned that he had been granted asylum finally allowed his emotions to flow through the inherently traumatic process, of telling a story over and over again, he always remained stoic. Now, knowing he was finally safe, the tears flowed. In that moment, I believe I saw that young man begin to purge the hurt and start to heal. All right, well, you can read for yourselves, it's our impact. That's a lot. That's a lot of cases, and it's on the cards that you have. And then I think it's the last one. Okay, so that's it. And again, any kind of, not just pro bono work when you're an attorney, but any kind of volunteer work internship is going to help you figure out what you're meant to do.
Another thing too, and I think we need
Yeah.
to say is, every year we're taking, or every, was it quarter semester, we're taking new
Mhm.
interns.
Yep.
Chandra is, one of our
For women's
interns
studies, yeah.
for this
Mhm.
year. So if you're interested, look us up.
Yeah. So we
There
have
you go.
very limited like paid slots throughout the year, but we try to allow for those that are doing this for other compensation. So let's say you have a scholarship, a fellowship, or you're doing it for credit. We are always open to that throughout the year. So currently we have Chandra who's doing a women's studies internship for credit. And then we have another student from San Diego State who's doing it for a political science class credit.
And one of the really important things, and maybe Chandra could talk a little bit about that, to mention it real quick. I see a big benefit in the interns. One of the things is we've been around, as I mentioned, quite some time. The work that we've been doing at Casa Colonia has been around for 30 years as well this year. But we often need the new voice, the new thoughts, the new way of looking at things, technology and all the different things that students can bring into the work. So, the work that's been done there by the interns through the past year, I think has really made a significant impact. So it's not, if you come to work with us, it won't be one of those things where, stuff these envelopes and go drop off the mail and bring me my lunch and anything like that. I think it would be something very, a good experience, I think, that we provide in that aspect. Any questions or comments or anything?
How do you guys get your funding or all the equipment and all the
That's
paper?
a good question.
So it's a mix of federal funding, some smaller foundation support, and year-round fundraising efforts, with our biggest one, which we just finished, our La Mancha Awards, where we provide awards to the attorneys that have really stood out in the law firm of the year. So it's what I used to call Academy Awards for attorneys, but it also awards our language support volunteers. And so that allows us to thank those, who have really stepped into the plate, but then it also is really our biggest fundraiser throughout the year. So.
And so, and it's one of those things where it's one of our departments, so we have a crew that's totally
Mhm.
focused on bringing in the money and bringing in the resources, so
Yeah.
it is very important. We are a nonprofit organization. I think the other side too of it all is lawyers, because of their oath, have an obligation to assist and lend a hand in the sense of a pro bono aspect. So we have that to lean into. So I would say if we were to see what our biggest source of income, I think it's billable hours by the pro bono. I mean, I'm not sure how that breaks down, but I would imagine that that's the
Yeah,
biggest.
so that would be the in-kind support, right? So not necessarily dollars coming in, but the in-kind support and the partnerships that we have in the community that would have cost like millions of dollars that we're able to benefit from.
Yeah. Any other questions, folks?
Where are you guys located?
Oh, gosh. Okay, here's the thing. We just moved. We were in Bankers Hill, which is beautiful already, right by Balboa Park. But we just moved as of September 1st. Officially, we are further into downtown on 525 B Street in what's called the Procopio Tower. We're on the 18th floor, so we have the entire 18th floor. So our old office was nice, but we had people having to share spaces in a pod, like Ismail was in a pod of 4 or 5 people, like open area. Now everybody has their own office, and even the program assistants and legal assistants have their own really nice, like, private cubicles. So, yeah, so I think we're still kind of getting used to the fact that we have this beautiful view and
Yeah.
we really look like a law firm. But, we're, the funny thing is that we had our events, our pro bono events. And the executive director, Carmen Chavez, and myself, including some of our crew, but basically, Carmen and I were picking up stuff, putting the chairs back, and she goes, you know what, if we were really like a Procopio law firm, people would be doing this for us. So that's, yeah.
Right.
So it looks really nice, though. We're doing our own, like, background work.
It's good to hear.
Like,
There.
yeah, if you were there, but you guys were.
Oh, bad.
So we did it. No, we did.
Where were you?
Yeah.
So, yeah, no. So our new space, like Ann said, it's really nice. We came up big time, so we weren't expecting it, but we're not, we have a view to the bay.
You know how businesses are, a lot of them are remote and they've been closing up shop in downtown or moving further north, right? It's happening in San Francisco too. So moving further north, that's why the space that we have now seems like it wouldn't have been affordable. It's affordable now to us because everyone's moving the opposite direction. We went south.
So we're good.
So,
Another thing I want to mention, on the 15th, we will be having an event at Casa Cornelia. We'll be sharing this information. We'll share it so you can send it out. It's going to be an interesting panel discussion from 1 to 3. Not sure if that works for y'all, but we will most likely make
share
it
it.
available on Zoom and different aspects, but it'll be about traumatic brain injuries, and it'll be Professor Monica Casper from the sociology department. She'll be presenting on the impact that traumatic brain injuries has on domestic violence. So we've all heard about it probably like in sports and football and all these different things. So TBI has a big name out there. I mean, if somebody gets hit in the head, they go through their concussion protocols and all that stuff. What happens when a domestic violence survivor is hit over the head? Police will probably give them an ice pack and you're done, and that's it. You'll never hear about it again. She's going to talk about the impacts of traumatic brain injury. And we'll also have a clinician kind of talk about how that plays out in the individual clients, but really important, interesting conversations. We'll make those available to you all so you can.
all these trainings are free because
Yeah.
again, it's part of our educational partnerships.
So we'll be providing that. So it'll be happening pretty quickly, but you can see the link if you want to be able to come on Zoom or see our beautiful space.
If you come first.
Different things.
We're just about out of time. It's 5:02.
Yep.
So we want to thank you for being here. I'm sure everyone, you guys, their contact information right there, so if they can get in contact with you, that's okay with you guys. Otherwise, that's our meeting for today. If you guys have any individual questions, you want to come up and talk to about pre-law or to Casa Cornelia, then go ahead. Otherwise, thank you all for coming and hope you guys have a good day.